My son forgot to hang up the phone. That was the moment my world shattered and everything I thought I knew about my family became a cruel illusion. I'd spent 64 years believing in sacrifice, in love, in the promise that kindness comes back around. But sometimes it just comes back to haunt you. If this story strikes a chord, if you've ever felt invisible in your own home or betrayed by the ones you love most, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share your own story below. I promise, you're not alone. The day started like any other, quiet and gray, the kind of spring morning that always made me feel both nostalgic and a little bit lonely. The house was still, save for the ticking of the clock in the hallway and the low hum of the refrigerator. I made myself a cup of coffee in the kitchen I'd remodeled 3 years ago, the one I'd saved up for after my husband passed away. I stood at the window, looking out at the blooming magnolia tree, the one Evan planted with me on his 8th birthday. There were days when I still heard his young voice in the yard, still saw his muddy sneakers abandoned by the door. That morning, I was almost grateful for the silence. My phone rang, cutting through my thoughts. Evan's name flashed across the screen, and I felt a brief spark of happiness. It had been a few days since he'd called, and even though he lived just 30 minutes away, he never seemed to have the time to visit. "Hi, Mom, how are you?" he asked, that cheerful tone in his voice that always made me want to believe everything was all right. We made small talk. He asked if I'd eaten, if I was taking my medication, if I needed groceries. The same routine check-ins, delivered with the barest touch of concern. "Jenna says hi," he added. His wife, Jenna, never called me Mom, always Grace, as if we were casual acquaintances and not family. I smiled through the ache in my chest. After a few minutes, Evan said he had to run, that he'd call again soon. I told him I loved him, and I meant it with all my heart, but he'd already hung up. Or so he thought. I put my phone down on the table, turning to rinse my mug, and that's when I heard it. The line was still open, voices clear and close, as if they were in the next room. I froze, every sense sharpening as I realized I was listening to a conversation not meant for my ears. "She's losing it, Jenna," Evan's voice came through, tight and anxious. "She left the oven on last week. She forgot to pay the water bill again. I don't know what else to do." Jenna's reply was cool, almost bored. "Evan, we can't keep dropping everything to check on her. You're the only child, so it all falls on us. And that house, look at what it's worth now. Did you see what the Johnsons got for theirs? We could finally afford that place in the hills." There was a pause. I heard the faint rustle of papers, maybe a realtor's brochure. "She's not going to like it, Jenna," Evan whispered. "It's her home. Dad built half of it by hand." "Well, she doesn't have a choice, does she?" Jenna said, her voice sharp. "She's a burden, Evan. I'm tired of playing nurse. We need to get her into a home. Sooner rather than later. Then we can get the house listed before the summer rush." I could hardly breathe. I backed away from the phone, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. My hands were shaking as I listened to my own child, my flesh and blood, plotting to put me away like an unwanted piece of furniture. They were talking about me as if I were already gone, as if the only thing left was to divide up the spoils. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from crying out. The reality of it crashed over me in waves. This was not a misunderstanding, not some fleeting frustration or moment of weakness. They were planning it. The people I had given my life to were discussing my fate, my home, my worth, as if I were nothing more than an obstacle to their happiness. The phone finally went silent. I stood there for a long time, staring at the magnolia blossoms outside the window, remembering the little boy who once brought me handfuls of muddy petals, who told me he'd always take care of me. I felt something inside me crack, then harden. I wiped my eyes, straightened my shoulders, and made myself a quiet promise. They might think I'm old and weak. They might think I have no fight left in me. But they're about to learn just how wrong they are. The air in my house felt different after that day. It wasn't just the sting of betrayal that haunted the rooms, but a strange, electric clarity, as if the walls themselves had overheard the plans to erase my life. I moved through the kitchen and living room in a fog, brushing my fingertips across the worn countertops and the frames holding 40 years of family photos. Every inch of this house, every crack and creak, held the memory of someone I used to be, a mother, a wife, a woman who believed home was forever. I barely slept that night. I lay awake listening to the rain tapping the old window panes, remembering the countless storms I'd watched with Evan from the porch swing. I remembered how he used to lean into me during thunder, whispering that he'd keep me safe. Somewhere along the way, the world had turned upside down. The child who once needed me now wanted me out of his life. By morning, the decision was made. I wouldn't confront Evan and Jenna, not yet. I would gather my strength and my wits, and I would decide my own fate. There was no way I'd let them banish me to some anonymous nursing facility, surrounded by strangers, stripped of the home my late husband and I had built from scratch. I would not be erased quietly. That morning, I went through my house with new eyes, cataloging every detail as if preparing for battle. The sun shone through the kitchen window, lighting up the mosaic tiles I'd chosen after months of saving up. I ran my hand along the banister, still sturdy after all these years, and remembered the Saturday Evan and I had sanded and stained it together. Upstairs, I paused in the room where my husband, Frank, had spent his final days. His old workbench was still in the garage, his initials carved into the side. It struck me then that everything they saw as a liquid asset was, to me, a lifetime of labor and love. The idea of strangers walking these halls, erasing every trace of our story, filled me with an ache so sharp I had to steady myself against the wall. But that pain gave way to something else, resolve. I pulled a dusty file box from the closet, the one marked important. I sat on the floor and sorted through a jumble of birth certificates, insurance policies, deeds, and Frank's yellowing service papers from Vietnam. I found the original house deed, still in my name, with the note, paid in full, 1998, scrawled at the bottom in Frank's broad handwriting. I held that piece of paper as if it were a shield. This house was my legacy, and I would decide what happened to it. Not Evan, not Jenna, not any outsider. A knock at the door startled me. I peered through the curtain and saw Mrs. Simmons from next door, holding a plate of blueberry muffins. "You've been on my mind, Grace," she said, stepping inside and placing the plate on the table. "Haven't seen Evan's car lately. Everything all right?" I forced a smile. "Oh, you know how it is. Kids and their busy lives." I didn't trust myself to say more. She patted my arm, her eyes kind but tired. "If you ever need anything, just knock. Don't let yourself get lonely, you hear?" I watched her leave, her footsteps echoing down the walkway. The loneliness, once a soft ache, now felt like a vice around my ribs. But her visit reminded me that, even if my own family had turned cold, I still had the power to choose how the story ended. That afternoon, I made a list. What do I want? I wrote at the top, the pen trembling in my hand. Where will I go? What comes with me? The questions were terrifying, but the answers were mine to decide. My next move was to call my attorney, a woman named Lisa Moretti who had helped Frank and me set up our wills years ago. Her voice was brisk but warm. "Grace. It's been too long. How can I help?" I took a shaky breath. "I need to make some changes, Lisa. And I need to know how to keep my house safe." We set an appointment for the next day. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at my reflection in the window as dusk fell. The woman looking back at me wasn't frail or defeated. She was older, yes, lined by grief and time, but there was steel in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Before bed, I pulled out the family photo album and paged through it slowly, letting every picture strengthen my resolve. Me and Frank on the front porch, Evan's first day of school, Christmas mornings, backyard barbecues, proof that love, once given, cannot be stolen. It was up to me to write the next chapter. That night, I fell asleep with the album open on my chest, my mind racing not with fear, but with a dangerous, exhilarating sense of possibility. For the first time since I lost Frank, I didn't feel helpless. I felt ready. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the distant sound of a lawnmower. For a few precious seconds, I forgot everything, the phone call, the betrayal, the ache in my chest. Then it all came rushing back, and I sat up with a new sense of purpose. There would be no more waiting, no more allowing others to decide my fate. After a cup of black coffee, I dressed in my best navy slacks and a soft gray blouse. The one Frank used to say brought out the blue in my eyes. I looked at myself in the mirror, searching for the version of Grace I had once been, competent, capable, respected. I saw her, faded at the edges but very much alive. I gathered my paperwork, house deed, insurance policy, Frank's will, and drove to Lisa Moretti's office. The old building sat on Main Street, flanked by a bakery and a bookstore. Inside, Lisa greeted me with a firm handshake and eyes that missed nothing. "You look well, Grace. What's on your mind?" I laid the papers on her desk, smoothing the creases. "Lisa, I need to know where I stand. My son and his wife want me out. They're plotting behind my back to move me into a nursing home and sell my house. I overheard them, by accident, but there's no doubt in my mind." Lisa's eyes softened, but she didn't interrupt. "I need to protect myself. I need to protect my home. I won't let them decide my future." The words tumbled out, equal parts fury and pain. It felt good to say them aloud, to put truth to my fear. Lisa nodded slowly, then spent the next hour combing through every document. She asked careful questions, about ownership, about any paperwork Evan might have touched, about whether I'd given him power of attorney or signed anything in the last year. I hadn't. The house was fully in my name. My accounts were in order. My medical and legal directives were ironclad. Frank and I had done things by the book. "Grace, legally, your son has no right to force you out or sell the house," Lisa explained, her tone gentle but confident. "You're in complete control. As long as you have your faculties, and believe me, you do, they can't do a thing without your consent." I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. For a moment, I almost laughed. It was such a simple thing, but after all the fear, the reassurance felt like water in the desert. Lisa continued, "If you want, we can update your will. Make sure any changes you want are clear and specific. We can also put safeguards in place so no one can act on your behalf without your explicit permission. And if you're really worried, I can refer you to a real estate agent who works exclusively for sellers, people who want to stay in control." I looked out the window at the steady flow of people on Main Street. I thought of Evan and Jenna, their plans, their assumptions that I would just quietly fade away. "Let's do it," I said. "All of it." Lisa's pen flew over the forms, outlining new directives and adding layers of protection I'd never thought necessary. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground steady beneath me. On my way out, I stopped at the bakery and bought a slice of lemon cake, Frank's favorite. I ate it alone in the park across the street, watching a group of children race each other through the grass. Their laughter drifted on the breeze, bittersweet and bright. I allowed myself a few tears, of relief, of grief, of something like hope. Back home, I set about making a plan. I walked through each room, deciding what truly mattered to me and what I could let go. I made lists, of memories, of keepsakes, of things I'd never told Evan about, things he'd never cared to ask. I realized with sudden clarity that, even if the walls and floors and windows of this house held my heart, it was my life, my story, that truly mattered. That evening, Evan called again. His voice was syrupy sweet, full of false concern. "How are you, Mom? Is everything okay? Have you thought more about assisted living? Jenna found a beautiful place, really, you'd love it." I forced a calm I didn't feel. "I appreciate your concern, Evan. But I'm not ready for any of that. I like my house. I like my life here." A pause. "Then, we're just trying to help, Mom. We worry about you." I heard Jenna's voice in the background, low, urgent, insistent. "We want what's best for you," Evan added. "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone gentle, "but what's best for me is making my own decisions. I hope you can respect that." He didn't argue, not directly, but I heard the frustration in his sigh. "Well, just think about it, okay? Jenna's parents are coming into town next weekend. Maybe we can all get together, talk things over." "That sounds nice," I lied, and said goodbye. I spent that night going over Lisa's advice, reading every document twice, 3 times, making sure nothing had slipped through the cracks. I realized that the future was still unwritten, and for the first time since Frank died, I believed I had the strength to shape it. As I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, I felt a familiar presence, a sense that Frank was nearby, watching over me, proud of the fight he saw returning to my spirit. I lay there in the dark, my fears quieter now, letting hope take root where despair had grown. The days that followed felt different, not easier, but more focused, as if my pain had crystallized into something sharp and necessary. I woke up early, brewed strong coffee, and let the steam warm my face as I planned my next steps. There was a comfort in the small routines, watering the violets on the windowsill, folding fresh laundry, humming old songs to myself. But beneath every motion, I was gathering strength, biding my time. I started sorting through the attic. It was a task I'd avoided for years, ever since Frank's passing, because so much of our life together was stored up there. I pulled down faded boxes and cracked them open one by one. School photos, love letters, ticket stubs from concerts we'd scraped together money to attend. Each item tugged at me, bittersweet but also grounding, a reminder that I was more than just Evan's mother. I was a woman with a full, complicated life, a history I refused to let be erased or rewritten by anyone else. As I worked, I kept thinking about the moment Evan had called me a burden, the way Jenna had spoken of my house as if it were nothing but a windfall waiting to be cashed in. The more I replayed those words, the more certain I became that I needed to act. Not out of revenge, but to protect the memory of the family I had built, the life Frank and I had sacrificed for. My future wouldn't be determined by anyone's impatience or greed. One morning, I called the real estate agent Lisa had recommended. Her name was Monica Lee, and from the moment she answered, I felt a calm, businesslike confidence in her voice. "Mrs. Sutton? I'd be honored to help however you need. I work with clients who want privacy and full control of their sales. There's no pressure here." We scheduled a meeting for the next day. I hung up, nerves jangling, but also felt a small, secret thrill. If Evan and Jenna wanted a war, they were about to discover that their opponent hadn't lost her edge. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table and started writing letters, real, handwritten ones. One for my sister in Oregon, letting her know that things had changed. Another for Frank's oldest friend, Pete, who always called to check on me at holidays. I told them I was thinking of making some big decisions, that I wanted their advice and maybe a little encouragement. Reaching out made the world feel less small, less lonely, even as I kept my true intentions to myself. Later, I took a walk around the neighborhood. The air was sweet with the scent of new grass and lilacs. As I passed Mrs. Simmons' house, she waved me over. "Grace, you look well. You seem lighter, somehow." I smiled, genuinely this time. "Thank you, Ellen. I think I'm finally ready to make some changes." She squeezed my hand. "It's never too late for that." Back at home, I set aside a few keepsakes for safekeeping: Frank's old watch, the quilt my mother made for my wedding, a locket Evan gave me for Mother's Day when he was 12. I started packing these in a small suitcase, not because I was ready to leave, but because I wanted to remind myself that, wherever I went, the things that truly mattered could come with me. The following morning, Monica arrived promptly at 9. She was brisk but warm, with sharp eyes and an easy laugh. She toured the house, complimenting my attention to detail and the sturdy craftsmanship Frank had insisted on. "You've kept this place beautiful, Mrs. Sutton," she said, pausing by the bay window. "If you choose to sell, you'll be in a very strong position." I told her my story, at least the parts one was willing to share. I explained that I wanted options, not pressure. I wanted to know my rights and the best path forward, not just the fastest payday. Monica nodded. "You're the owner, Grace. No one can force you out, not without your say. If you want, we can do this quietly, find buyers who value privacy, keep everything above board." She walked me through the process step by step: what the house was worth, how quickly it could move, what it might mean for my next chapter. She assured me that, whatever I decided, I'd remain in control the entire way. After Monica left, I sat in my sunlit living room, surrounded by the echoes of laughter and long-ago arguments, of birthday parties and rainy afternoons. I realized that, no matter what happened, I was stronger than I'd given myself credit for. I could see a future, uncertain, yes, but no longer entirely frightening. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea and toasted Frank's photograph on the mantel. "You always told me I was tougher than I looked," I whispered, smiling through tears. "I think you might have been right." For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a woman on the verge of reclaiming her story. The weekend brought a restless energy I hadn't felt in years. I spent Saturday morning deep cleaning the house, scrubbing baseboards, and polishing the silver picture frames that lined the mantel. There was a fierce satisfaction in the work, as if every stroke erased a little more of the doubt that had weighed on me for so long. By midday, the house sparkled, each room a museum of memories, but also a testament to my resilience. In the afternoon, I took a long walk to clear my mind. I wandered through the old park where Evan had played as a boy, the same cracked swings still hanging from rusted chains, the same oak tree with our initials carved deep in its bark. The sun dappled through the branches, casting moving shadows on the path, and I found myself thinking not just about what I might lose, but about all that I had survived. Frank's death, raising a son alone, the long, lonely winters, I had outlasted them all. This new challenge would be no different. Back at home, I brewed a pot of chamomile tea and settled at the kitchen table with Monica's note spread out before me. I reviewed the comps, the listing strategies, the questions she'd suggested I ask myself. What do I want most from this next chapter? How much am I willing to let go? Who do I want to become, when the dust finally settles? I was lost in thought when the phone rang. Evan's name appeared, and a flicker of anxiety tightened my chest. I picked up, my voice as steady as I could manage. "Hi, sweetheart." He sounded cheerful, too cheerful, the way people do when they're trying to mask discomfort. "Hey, Mom. Just checking in. Jenna and I were thinking we'd stop by tomorrow afternoon, maybe bring lunch?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then agreed. "Of course. That would be nice." "Great," he replied. "We've been so busy, but we want to make sure you're doing all right." There was a beat of silence. "We love you, Mom. We just want you to be safe." "I know, Evan," I answered, not letting him hear the tremor in my voice. "See you tomorrow." After he hung up, I sat quietly, the old kitchen clock ticking out the seconds. I knew exactly what this visit meant. They were coming to check the lay of the land, to see how close I was to surrender. They expected to find me tired, perhaps confused, maybe even ready to accept their plan. They had no idea what I'd been up to. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with memories. Evan as a child, clutching my hand on the first day of kindergarten, his nervous excitement when he brought Jenna home for the first time, the pride in his eyes the day he graduated college. Somewhere along the line, our bond had shifted, eroded by years and by the subtle, corrosive influence of someone else's ambition. I woke before dawn, heart pounding, and moved quietly through the house, checking every window, every door. I ran my hands over the furniture Frank and I had chosen together, the paintings I'd hung on a whim, the rugs worn thin by decades of footsteps. I wanted to memorize every detail, to carry the sense of this home with me, no matter what came next. When Evan and Jenna arrived the following afternoon, they came bearing sandwiches from my favorite deli. Jenna wore a bright smile and greeted me with a rehearsed warmth. Evan looked nervous, glancing around as if measuring the distance between each piece of furniture. We sat together at the dining table, the sunlight spilling over our plates. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Jenna chatted about her new yoga studio, about summer travel plans, about the latest local news. Evan asked about my health, my sleep, my friends from church. Then, as the plates were cleared and Jenna poured us all coffee, the conversation shifted. Evan's voice was gentle but insistent. "Mom, we've been thinking. It's just not safe for you to be here alone anymore. The house is a lot to keep up. We want you to be comfortable, to have help when you need it." Jenna leaned in, her expression earnest. "There's a wonderful assisted living community just a few miles from here. Beautiful grounds, caring staff. You'd have your own apartment, privacy, but also support. We toured it last week. We thought you might come with us to see it." I looked at their faces, so hopeful, so sure of themselves, so certain they knew what was best for me. I felt a flicker of sadness, but also a fierce, stubborn pride. "I appreciate your concern," I said quietly. "But I'm not ready to leave my home. Not yet. I have plans here, things I want to finish, memories I'm not willing to let go of." Evan sighed, disappointment clear. "We're just trying to do what's best, Mom." "I know you think that," I replied, holding his gaze. "But what's best for me is something only I can decide." Jenna opened her mouth to protest, then seemed to think better of it. The conversation drifted back to safer topics, but a tension lingered in the room. When they left an hour later, Evan hugged me tightly, almost desperately. Jenna offered a stiff, polite smile. As their car pulled away, I stood at the window, hands steady, heart beating hard but strong. I wasn't going to let anyone write my ending but me. After Evan and Jenna's visit, the silence that settled over the house felt different. Not heavy with defeat, but alive with purpose, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see what I'd do next. I sat in the kitchen, sunlight creeping across the tiles, sipping the coffee they'd left behind. I could still smell Jenna's perfume in the air, a sharp reminder that my life was not as invisible to them as I sometimes wished, but they had never really seen me, not the way Frank had, not the way I saw myself. That evening, I called Monica and told her I wanted to move forward, not with a "for sale" sign on the lawn for the whole neighborhood to gossip about, but with the quiet, discreet process she'd promised. Monica agreed to begin quietly contacting her network of cash buyers, those looking for a home like mine, no questions, no drama, just a clean sale. She would come by tomorrow for photos and paperwork. "You're sure, Grace?" she asked. "Once we start, it'll move fast." My answer was clear: it's time. I want my choices to be my own. After I hung up, I wandered through the house with a notebook, listing the things I'd want to take: my jewelry box, a few family photos, the quilt, Frank's letters, a set of china I'd inherited from my mother. The rest, I realized, was just stuff. For so many years, I'd clung to these rooms and possessions as proof of a life well lived. Now, they felt lighter, treasures, yes, but not anchors. I went into the garage, rummaging through old toolboxes and storage bins. There, tucked in a folder, I found the note Frank had written me on our 25th wedding anniversary. I read it twice, tears blurring the words. Whatever the world throws at you, Gracie, don't let anyone make you small. That single line steadied my resolve more than anything else could. The next day, Monica arrived in jeans and a crisp white shirt, her hair pulled back, tablet and camera at the ready. She moved through the house with respectful efficiency, photographing each room and making notes about details, original woodwork, updated kitchen, the view of the garden from the master bedroom. She complimented my care and taste, but never pressed for personal details. I signed the listing paperwork with a hand that didn't tremble. We sat together at the kitchen table, and Monica explained the timeline. I'll reach out to 3 buyers today. You'll have offers within 48 hours. If you accept, we can close in under 2 weeks, cash. You'll have time to move, no rush. And your privacy is protected. I nodded, heart pounding with anticipation and fear, but I kept thinking of Frank's note. No one would make me small, not now, not ever. After Monica left, I called Lisa to update her, and she agreed to review every contract, every detail, before I signed anything final. You're doing the right thing, Grace, Lisa said. You're taking back your power. It's never too late for that. That evening, Evan called again, this time with Jenna on speaker. Their voices were oddly bright, brittle, like people performing happiness. They asked about my day, if I needed groceries, if I was eating enough. I answered politely, giving nothing away. I could feel Jenna straining for some hint that I was weakening, that I'd changed my mind about their plan. Instead, I told them I'd been busy, cleaning, catching up with friends, planning a short trip. It feels good to have things to look forward to, I said, and let the sentence hang there. Jenna offered to stop by and help with bills or organizing, but I declined, saying I had everything under control. There was a beat of uncomfortable silence, and then Evan said, "We love you, Mom. We really do." I almost believed him, or wanted to. But trust, once shattered, is never whole again. After we hung up, I stood at the kitchen sink and looked out at the garden, remembering how Frank used to hum as he weeded the flower beds. The magnolia tree Evan and I planted was in full bloom now, white petals fluttering in the twilight, the air sweet and heavy. I felt sorrow, yes, but also gratitude for everything this house had given me. Letting go would hurt, but it would not destroy me. That night, I packed a small suitcase with the items I'd set aside. Each piece I placed inside was a memory I'd earned, a fragment of a life no one could take from me. I set the bag by the door, ready for whatever came next. As I drifted off to sleep, I imagined Frank's arms around me, whispering that I was stronger than any storm. For the first time in a long while, I believed him. I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of anticipation, like the hush before a summer thunderstorm. My hands were steady as I made breakfast, black coffee, whole wheat toast, the same routine I'd had for years. But nothing felt ordinary. Every sound in the house seemed louder, every beam of sunlight brighter, as if the place itself understood that something was about to change for good. By mid-morning, Monica called to say 2 serious offers had already come in, both from investors who could close within days and had no interest in negotiations or delays. Grace, these are the kinds of buyers who won't ask questions, won't poke around. They just want the property, and they're willing to pay top dollar. Do you want to review the details together, or do you need more time? Let's review them today, I said, surprising myself with my own decisiveness. Monica arrived with the contracts and sat across from me at the kitchen table, her voice calm and patient as she explained each point. The offers were even higher than I'd expected, almost as if the universe wanted to reward me for every year I'd spent putting others first. For a fleeting moment, I wondered what Evan and Jenna would say if they knew. The thought gave me a pang, but also a deep, private satisfaction. I asked Monica every question I could think of. Was there any fine print? Would I have time to move out comfortably? Were there hidden risks? She answered everything without flinching, reminding me again that the final choice was always mine. After Monica left, I took a long walk around the neighborhood. Every corner held a memory: Mrs. Simmons' porch swing, the oak tree where Evan scraped his knee as a boy, the little library box Frank had helped me install for the neighborhood kids. I let myself feel the ache of leaving, but not regret. I'd carried this place in my heart for decades. Now, I'd carry it with me wherever I went. That afternoon, I called Lisa and read her every line of the 2 offers. She confirmed that both were more than fair. "You can't go wrong, Grace," she said. "Take the one that feels right in your bones." It was the simplest decision I'd made in weeks. I chose the offer with the quickest closing, the one that guaranteed privacy and a gentle exit. I called Monica and told her to proceed. "Congratulations, Grace," she said. "You did this. You took back your future." The rest of the day was a blur. I sorted through closets, deciding what to donate, what to pack, what to leave behind. I made lists for the movers Monica recommended, people she trusted, who would treat my belongings with care. I called my sister in Oregon again, this time sharing everything, even the hardest parts. She listened in silence, then told me she was proud. "You never were the type to let life happen to you," she said. "I always knew you'd fight for yourself, one way or another." In the evening, I called Evan, my heart pounding with dread and defiance. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mom. Everything okay?" There was a time I would have softened, maybe even lied. But I found myself speaking clearly, calmly, without apology. "Evan, I want you to know that I'm selling the house. I've made all the arrangements. I've thought it through, and this is my decision." There was stunned silence, followed by an incredulous, You're what? Without talking to us?" "This is my home, Evan. And it's my right. I need a fresh start. I need to be somewhere that's mine, on my own terms. Please respect that." He sputtered, and in the background I heard Jenna's voice, sharp, insistent, already calculating. "But Mom, you don't have to do this. We could have helped. We could." I cut him off gently but firmly. "No, Evan. I'm doing what I have to do. I'm not anyone's problem, and I'm certainly not anyone's burden. I need you to accept that." The call ended awkwardly, with promises to talk more later, but I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time in my life, I was making a choice just for me. That night, as I lay in bed, I looked around my half-packed room, boxes labeled with careful handwriting, suitcases lined up along the wall. Instead of fear, I felt a strange, steady hope. I was leaving behind not just a house, but every shadow of doubt I'd ever carried. The future wasn't certain, but it was finally, undeniably mine. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity, packing, making arrangements, and fielding calls from Monica and Lisa as the sale rushed forward. Movers came and went, gently wrapping the few precious things I refused to leave behind: the quilt, the jewelry box, Frank's old tool belt, a faded family photo from a long-ago summer picnic. Each item I packed felt like a tiny rebellion against the notion that my life could be so easily erased. I was surprised by how little sentimentality I had for the rest. The donated clothes, the chipped teacups, the boxes of outdated Christmas decorations, all things I'd once clung to, now given away without a second thought. It struck me that I was shedding more than just possessions. I was letting go of all the expectations and obligations that had defined me for so long. Monica called to confirm the closing date. "Everything's on track, Grace. You'll have the funds by next week. The buyers are thrilled, and they're honoring your request to keep the details quiet." Her voice brimmed with genuine happiness for me. "Do you know where you'll go next?" I'd been turning the question over in my mind. The thought of another big house held no appeal. Instead, I found myself drawn to the idea of a smaller, simpler place, maybe a sunlit apartment near the park, Somewhere I could walk to the farmer's market, where I could be anonymous if I wanted to, or make new friends if I felt brave enough. I spent the afternoon searching online, calling a few listings. A friendly woman named Diane at a senior community on Lakeview Lane answered my questions with patience and warmth. You'd have your own space, but also plenty of neighbors if you like company. The gardens are beautiful in spring. Why don't you come by and take a look? That night, I lay awake thinking about what it would mean to truly start over at my age. Was I foolish to hope for new beginnings? Frank's voice echoed in my mind, his favorite saying, "If you're breathing, you're not done yet." I let the words soothe me to sleep. The next morning, I drove to Lakeview Lane. The air was fresh, the grounds filled with wildflowers and laughter from a group of women playing cards on the patio. Diane greeted me with a handshake and a tour. The apartment she showed me was small but bright, with big windows facing a tranquil pond. It felt peaceful. It felt like possibility. "I'll take it," I said, surprising us both. Over the next few days, everything moved quickly. I finalized the lease, transferred utilities, and scheduled my move. Monica oversaw the sale with flawless precision, and Lisa double-checked every legal detail. When the day finally came to hand over my house keys, I walked through each empty room one last time, touching the walls, whispering silent goodbyes. In the garden, I picked a single magnolia blossom and pressed it between the pages of Frank's last letter. I was locking the door for the final time when Evan's car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out, Jenna close behind, their faces tight with confusion and something that looked dangerously close to anger. "Mom, what is going on?" Evan demanded. "Why didn't you tell us you were leaving today?" Jenna's eyes swept over the moving truck and the boxes on the porch. "Where are you going? What about all our plans? We thought." I met their questions with calm certainty. "I've made my decision. The house is sold, and I'm moving to Lakeview Lane. This is what I want, and it's already done." Evan stared at me, hurt and disbelief flickering across his face. "But Mom, this is our family home." I thought. I held up a hand. It was my home. Now, it's someone else's. You both have your own lives, your own dreams. So do I. Jenna's lips curled, unable to hide her resentment. "You should have consulted us. After all we've done." I shook my head gently. What I needed was support, not control. "I wish you both well, but this is where our paths split." There was nothing left to say. I hugged Evan, his arms stiff around me, so different from when he was small, and pressed the house keys into his palm, not as an invitation, but as a final farewell. As the moving truck pulled away, I watched my son and daughter-in-law grow smaller in the rearview mirror. My heart ached, but I didn't look back. For the first time in years, the future was open before me, not as something to fear, but as something to claim. My new apartment was a far cry from the rambling old house I'd left behind, but as I stepped across the threshold with my suitcase in hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: relief. The rooms were filled with afternoon light, the walls painted a soft cream, the windows wide enough to let in the breeze from the lake. It was quiet but not lonely. As I unpacked, I realized the space was a blank canvas, a place to build not just a new life, but a new version of myself. The first night was difficult. I lay in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the building, distant laughter from the common room, the hum of an elevator, the soft murmur of someone playing jazz down the hall. I missed the creaks and sighs of my old home, the way the floors would settle at night, the way Frank's old chair seemed to anchor the living room. But the pain wasn't as sharp as I'd feared. It was more like the ache of a healed scar, proof that I had survived. The next morning, I made coffee and took my mug out to the balcony. The pond sparkled in the sun, ducks gliding past in the cool morning air. A woman about my age waved from the next balcony over. "First day," she called. I smiled and nodded. "You can always tell," she laughed. I'm Roberta. Let me know if you need anything, coffee, dinner, advice on which bridge group to avoid. Her warmth made the place feel instantly less strange. Later that day, Diane stopped by with a welcome basket, fruit, tea, a loaf of homemade bread. You settling in all right? She asked, her voice sincere. I think so, I said, surprised by how true it felt. That afternoon, I hung my family photos on the living room wall, placing Frank's picture in the center. I set out my quilt, arranged my few precious mementos, and filled the bookshelf with dog-eared novels. The place transformed quickly, not into a replica of my old life, but into something lighter, something that felt like hope. Days passed and I slipped into a new rhythm. I walked the gardens every morning, chatting with neighbors and breathing in the scent of lilacs and fresh-cut grass. Roberta invited me to her book club, and I went, nervous at first but quickly drawn in by the laughter and the easy way stories tumbled out among these women. I found myself looking forward to meals in the sunny dining room, swapping recipes and stories, feeling for the first time in ages that I truly belonged somewhere. But not all was easy. Evan called, sometimes twice in a day, his tone swinging from guilt to confusion to a kind of desperate longing I hadn't heard in him since he was a boy. Are you sure you're okay, Mom? Is it too small? Are you lonely? I answered honestly. I'm adjusting, Evan. It's not always easy, but I'm making friends. I like the quiet. I like the freedom. He never quite knew what to say to that. Jenna called only once, her words clipped and formal. We hope you're comfortable, Grace. Let us know if you need anything. I recognized the subtext. She was angry, or maybe embarrassed, that I had taken control of my story instead of letting her write the ending for me. I kept my responses kind, but firm. I wanted no more arguments, no more negotiations. This was my choice, and I intended to honor it. As summer deepened, I found myself happier than I'd been in a long time. I signed up for a watercolor class, took long walks by the lake, and even joined Roberta for bingo nights and weekend brunch. I remembered Frank's words, don't let anyone make you small, and for the first time in years, I truly felt bigger than my fears. On a Saturday afternoon, as sunlight streamed through my windows and laughter drifted in from the hallway, I sat down at my new kitchen table and wrote a letter to Evan. I didn't blame him for what had happened, not really. Life, I'd realized, can twist love into fear, and fear into selfishness. But I needed him to know that my life was my own now, and that sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give is letting their child face the consequences of their choices. I sealed the letter, setting it aside for another day, and went out to meet my new friends for dinner. The evening air was filled with promise. My heart felt unburdened, light, and wholly my own. Late summer arrived in a riot of color, golden sun pouring through the windows every morning, the gardens alive with hydrangeas and marigolds. My life at Lakeview Lane unfolded gently, days marked by simple routines and unexpected joys. I learned the best time to walk by the pond, when the ducklings would be out and the air was still cool. I learned the names of all the gardeners, and the way the sunlight lit up the hallway in my apartment every afternoon. Most importantly, I learned that starting over was not just possible, but beautiful, even at my age. Every Sunday, I called my sister in Oregon. Our conversations grew longer and warmer. We reminisced about our childhood, about Frank, about the early days when Evan was a baby and I'd worried over every cough, every scraped knee. My sister's voice was a comfort, a gentle thread connecting my past to my present. I made friends, real friends, for the first time in years. Roberta and I walked together most evenings, trading stories about our families, our heartbreaks, our stubborn streaks. She reminded me of the woman I'd been before loss and betrayal dulled my edges, funny, sharp, unafraid to speak her mind. One afternoon, I volunteered to help organize a community picnic. I spent hours in the kitchen making my famous potato salad and baking an apple pie from scratch, Frank's old recipe card still stained and wrinkled. As I worked, I sang along to the radio, feeling lighter with every step. The picnic was a roaring success, sunshine, laughter, music, and new faces that felt instantly like old friends. I watched as neighbors danced in the grass and realized, for the first time, how much I'd missed being part of something bigger than myself. Meanwhile, I kept my promise to myself to live on my own terms. I went to yoga classes, tried painting, even learned how to play bridge, badly, but with plenty of good-natured teasing from the group. There were quiet nights when I missed the house, and Frank, with an ache that felt as old as time. But there was always something, or someone, to pull me back to the present, a call from Roberta, an invitation for tea, the laughter drifting in from the gardens. Evan's calls grew less frequent, and when they came, they were softer, less insistent. He asked about my days, about the people I'd met. Once, he apologized, awkwardly, but sincerely. "I didn't mean to make you feel unwanted, Mom. I thought I was helping." "I know, Evan," I told him. "But help means listening, not deciding. I needed to do this for myself." There was a long pause, then a shaky, "I miss you." I swallowed the old urge to comfort him and instead let the silence stretch between us. "I love you, Evan. That's never changed. But you have your own family now, your own choices to make. And so do I." After that call, I sat for a long time in the fading sunlight, tears slipping down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from the bittersweet relief of having said everything I needed to say. By September, I was thriving. I joined a writing group and started a story of my own, pouring memories onto paper, giving shape to everything I'd carried inside for years. It was healing in a way I hadn't expected, a way of reclaiming my voice, my agency, and the belief that my story wasn't over just because one chapter had ended. On my birthday, my new friends threw a surprise party, cake, flowers, even a handmade card signed by every resident in the building. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt truly celebrated. As I blew out the candles, I made a wish, not for things to return to how they were, but for the courage to keep moving forward. That night, I sat by my window, watching the stars rise above the lake. I pressed my palm to the glass, whispered goodnight to Frank, and thanked him for teaching me that real strength is quiet, stubborn, and refuses to quit. As autumn painted the trees along Lakeview Lane in gold and crimson, I felt a gentle peace settle into my bones. My days fell into a rhythm that was mine alone, morning walks along the pond, afternoons spent with friends, evenings writing or simply listening to the hush of the leaves outside my window. The fear and anger that had shadowed me through the summer faded with the heat, replaced by a new sense of belonging. I was not just surviving, I was living, and even growing. It surprised me how easy it was to let go of old patterns. I no longer waited for Evan's calls, no longer checked my phone for Jenna's sharp texts or offers of help. Instead, I let my world fill with the people and passions I'd rediscovered. Roberta and I became nearly inseparable, partners in every community event, each other's confidant, even occasionally rivals at bingo night. Our laughter felt like a second youth. One Saturday, Roberta convinced me to join her on an outing to the City Art Museum. I'd always loved art but hadn't visited a gallery since Frank passed away. We wandered through halls hung with bright canvases and soft watercolors, pausing to lose ourselves in the colors and textures. I found myself wondering what Frank would say about the strange sculptures and bold paintings, how he'd roll his eyes at the abstract ones, then turn thoughtful at a quiet landscape. When we stopped in front of a painting of a woman sitting alone in her kitchen, I caught my own reflection in the glass. For the first time in years, I saw myself as someone interesting, someone with layers, someone worth painting. We finished the day with lunch at a small cafe, the air sweet with the smell of cinnamon rolls and strong coffee. Roberta raised her mug to me. "To new beginnings," she toasted, her eyes sparkling. I smiled, feeling the truth of her words down to my core. Back at my apartment, I checked my mailbox to find a card from my sister. She'd written about the coming holidays, urging me to visit, to let the past be the past, to give Evan space to find his own way. You deserve joy, Grace. You always did, she wrote. I sat by the window and watched geese wheel overhead, thinking about the meaning of family, how sometimes, letting go is the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for those you love. In early November, I received a letter from Evan. Not an email or a rushed phone call, but a real, handwritten letter. His words were awkward at first, full of apologies, but as I read on, I could feel the wall between us begin to crumble. He wrote about his own regrets, how hard it was for him to watch me change, how afraid he was, of losing me, of losing himself. He admitted that Jenna and he had been talking about moving away, starting over somewhere new, and that part of their push to sell the house had come from their own fear, not just selfishness. I wish I'd listened better, he wrote. I hope someday you can forgive me. My first reaction was anger, old habits die hard. But as I reread his words, I felt only sadness, and then a sort of relief. I realized that holding on to bitterness only made me smaller, while forgiveness, even if quiet and private, let me breathe. That evening, I wrote back. I didn't gloss over the pain or the betrayal. I told him honestly how much it had hurt, how lonely it had felt to realize he'd stopped seeing me as a person, reduced me to a problem to be solved. But I also told him that I was proud of the life I'd built on my own, and that I hoped he could find the courage to do the same. Roberta came over after dinner with a bottle of wine. We drank and talked late into the night, sharing secrets we'd never told anyone else, regrets, losses, the stubborn hopes we still carried. At one point she squeezed my hand and said, "You saved yourself, Grace. Don't ever forget it." As the night wore on, I stood on my balcony, cool wind on my face, heart unburdened. The city lights shimmered on the pond, and I understood, finally, what Frank had always tried to teach me: the only life worth living is the one you claim for yourself. Winter arrived early that year, the world outside my window wrapped in a hush of frost and pale morning light. My new apartment, once foreign, now felt like a sanctuary, a place that held not just my memories but my newfound independence. I decorated for the holidays with simple touches: a wreath on the door, a bowl of oranges and cloves on the table, the old patchwork quilt draped over my favorite chair. Each item was chosen, not out of obligation or habit, but because it brought me joy. As Christmas approached, invitations poured in, from Roberta, from my writing group, from neighbors who now felt like family. I found myself saying yes to almost everything: potlucks, game nights, even a caroling party down by the pond. The days were filled with warmth and the bright, honest laughter that only comes from feeling truly accepted. I was, for the first time in decades, not just seen, but celebrated for exactly who I was. On Christmas Eve, my sister called and begged me to visit. I laughed, promising I'd come in the new year. "You sound happy, Grace," she said quietly. "Happier than I've heard you in a long time." She was right. The old ache for what was lost had softened, replaced by gratitude for all I'd found: friends, peace, and the rediscovery of my own courage. That night, I sat by the window, sipping tea and reading Evan's letter again. I hadn't heard from him or Jenna in a few weeks, but the words lingered, more healing with every read. I no longer needed to wait by the phone or search my heart for blame. I'd released them, and myself, from the old cycle of hurt. New Year's Day dawned clear and bright. I bundled up and walked the snowy path around the pond with Roberta and 2 other friends from the building. We made resolutions at the water's edge, nothing grand or impossible, just promises to keep choosing ourselves, to say yes to joy, to refuse to shrink in the face of anyone else's expectations. Later that afternoon, as sunlight poured in through the windows and laughter rang out from the hall, I sat at my little desk and wrote the last pages of my story. Not just the one from my writing group, but the real one, the story of a woman who lost everything she thought defined her, only to discover she was far more than a house, a role, or even a mother. I wrote about heartbreak, about standing up for myself, about how love sometimes means letting go, and how peace arrives when you finally trust yourself enough to start again. As I finished, my phone buzzed with a new message from Evan. Just a simple line, "I'm glad you're happy, Mom. I hope we can start fresh someday. Love you." I smiled, softly, gratefully, not needing anything more. That evening, my friends gathered in my apartment, toasting the year ahead with sparkling cider. Roberta made a speech, eyes twinkling, "To Grace, the bravest woman I know. You taught all of us that it's never too late to reclaim your life. Here's to new beginnings." And I realized, as laughter filled the room and the city lights twinkled outside, that my journey wasn't just about surviving betrayal or moving out of a house. It was about choosing myself, over and over, no matter who tried to write my ending for me. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt forgotten or underestimated, don't stay silent. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who needs to know it's never too late to begin again. Thank you for being part of my story. Until next time, take care, and don't let anyone make you small.